Hello everyone, welcome to ButteredGaming. I'm your host, ButteredToast III. Today I'm coming to you with a deck showcase of mine. Now this is going to be my mill deck showcase, and the status of this deck in terms of being standard legal is most definitely not. Got some pretty old cards in here. So in total there are 22 lands, and you can see they are a mix between islands and swamps, and then a couple dual lands, as well as a artifact colorless land there. There are 6 islands, 22 total. There are 5 swamps, 4 Nephalia Drownyards, which are pretty nice because they are tapped to add 1 mana, but then you can also pay 3 mana and tap this card to make the target player discard the top 3 cards of his or her library, which is nice for if I don't have, like, say, something else to use at that time, and I just have a bunch of mana extra. I can just use that and go with it. And then we've got our 4 drowned Catacombs here, which are pretty nice. They're just tap to add blue or black, and they enter the battlefield unless you control an island or a swamp, so it's not that bad, because you can just pull out an island or a swamp if you have one, and if you don't, it's probably the first turn, so it doesn't even matter usually anyway, because there's no cards in this deck that will actually need only 1 mana. So then we've got 2 Darkslick Shores. They enter the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or fewer other lands, and you can tap to add blue or black. So it's pretty decent too, except when you get later, because then they start, losing their... they start having to be tapped when they come into play. So next we've got our creatures, and as you can see, there are not a whole lot of creatures in this deck. So first of all, we've got 3 fog banks, and the reason I put these in there is because I was using a lot of enchantments and sorceries and stuff, and then I didn't really have anything to defend myself with, so these fog banks are pretty decent for defending because they are defender with flying, and they prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to and by fog bank, so they're basically just there as a nice wall. So then this is one of my more recent acquisitions. So it's a Mindeye Drake, and it is a little expensive for 5, but it is a flying 2/5, which is pretty good for blocking just by itself. And then you're also gonna deter people from trying to kill it, because when it dies, target player puts the top 5 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. And I've got something else pretty like that. It's a little older, back from Dark Ascension. These are a couple Geralf's Mindcrushers, and they are expensive as well. 6 mana drop. A lot of the creatures in this deck are pretty expensive, but it is a 5/5, which is even better than the Mindeye Drake. But it does not have flying, which is not too bad actually. And so when it enters the battlefield, target player puts the top 5 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, which is amazing because you just play the card and they're just like, oh, 5 gone, and then you have a 5/5 on the field. But then it's also got Undying, so when it dies and it doesn't have a +1/+1 counter on it, you can bring it back and do it again. So that prevents people from trying to kill it a little bit, which is really nice. Another more recent acquisition of mine is a Nightveil Specter. So it's only a 3 mana drop, but you need all blue or black mana, which isn't a problem in my deck, except for the Nephalia Drownyards. And it does have flying as well, and it's a 2/3, and the nice thing about it is whenever it deals damage to a player, the player exiles the top card of his or her library. And that's not all, you can also play the cards exiled this way, which is pretty decent, I think. I've never actually been able to use it yet, because it is, as I said, recent addition to the deck. But hey, we'll get there eventually. So then we've got a Geth, Lord of the Vault, which is a really nice one as well. It is also 6 mana drop, but it's a 5/5 with Intimidate, which is really nice. twice, and then you can pay X and a swamp to put target artifact or creature card with a converted mana cost X from an opponent's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control tapped. So you can basically steal the cards out of their graveyard, which is amazing because in this deck you're putting lots of stuff in the graveyard, so you basically have your choice of creatures from their graveyard. And then they put the top X cards of his or library into his or graveyard, which is amazing as well because it gives you more fodder for stealing stuff with Geth Lord of the Vault. So next I've got this Oona, Queen of the Fae. This is out of the vault. It is foil, and it is a 6 mana drop as well, but it is a flying 5/5 as well, so it's amazing. And then you can pay X and a blue or black. Then you get to choose a color. Target opponent exiles top X cards of his or her library, which is amazing just by itself, and then for each card of the chosen color exiled this way, so it's amazing against monocolored decks just by itself, but it does pretty decent against dual colored decks as well, because you can just, you know, it's still a 50-50 chance. And then for each color chosen this way, put a 1/1 blue and black fairy rogue creature token with flying on the battlefield, so that's just a bunch of extra stuff for either attacking if you want, which is not the point of this deck. So I would use them just for blocking. So then another pretty recent addition from Gatecrash actually is a Consuming Aberation. So this is a 5 mana drop, so a little tiny bit less expensive than normal. And it is a star, and its power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your opponent's graveyard, which in this deck is pretty amazing just by itself, because by the time you get this card out, you'll probably have them down a lot of cards just by itself, so there's that. And then whenever you cast a spell, so any kind of spell at all, each opponent reveals cards from the top of his or her library until he or she reveals a land card. Then you put those cards in the graveyard, so it's each time you play a spell, and it's just, it gets amazing pretty fast. So then the last creature we've got here is Lord of the Vault. It is a 7-drop, and it's a 7/7 flying, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you get to exile the top 7 cards of that player's library, and then put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield under your control. So that's an amazing card as well. So it's pretty awesome, just gotta say. Just some amazing stuff. Alright, so now I've got Planeswalker. I used to have 2 Planeswalkers in this deck, but now I only have 1, Jace Memory Adept, and it's a 5-drop for 4 starting loyalty counters. And his +1 is you get to draw a card, and target player puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard, which is pretty decent. It's not that great, but I got it for the -0, or the 0 cost, which is target player puts the top 10 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, which is incredible in this deck. I don't really use the -7 a whole lot, because I think the 0 is just a lot better. I don't know, but any number of target players each draw 20 cards, so you can have just your opponent. You can also draw 20 if you want. You can have all your opponents draw 20 cards. I don't know, it's great stuff. Alright, so let's get into our little mix of instants, sorceries, and even an enchantment or 2. Looks like there's only 2 enchantments. Let's see if we can, there we go. Alright, so this is the bulk of the deck, as you can see here. There it is, yep. Alright, so we're going to start off with an enchantment. And we've got 3 of these guys, Curse of the Bloody Tomes, which are pretty awesome because they're only a 3 mana drop, and they enchant a target player, that player being your opponent. And at the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, that player puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, which is just really nice because it's an extra 2 cards every upkeep for them. So, and it's only 3 mana drop. And so now I've got 3 Mind Sculptors, and as you can see, one of them is foil. So it's a 2-mana drop, which is pretty awesome. And then you put the top 7 cards of his or her library into the graveyard, target opponent. So that's pretty amazing, just because it's 2-mana drop and it's top 7, so it's 7 more cards off the top of their graveyard, which is amazing, or off the top of their deck, which is amazing. So then you've got a couple Tome Scours, which is amazing as well, because it's only a 1-mana drop, and it's 5 cards into their graveyard. So it's like a Mind Sculptor. No foils this time, but it's like a Mind Sculptor, except it's a little less expensive, and it does a little bit less, but it's still pretty awesome, because that's 5 more cards just gone. Now, I've been trying to implement a little bit of card draw into this deck, and we'll see how it goes. I just started doing it. So it's a Divination, which a lot of you may know about. So it's a 3-drop for just drawing 2 cards. Now, the reason I did this is because I played a game on Magic the Gathering Duels of the Planeswalkers 2012, where the deck had a lot of draw cards, and it seemed to help out a lot, so I'm gonna try to implement that a little bit. Alright, so now we've got a Mind Grind, which is a 2-drop with X, and each opponent reveals cards from the top of his or her library until he or she reveals X land cards, and then puts all cards revealed this way into his or her graveyard. X can't be 0. So that's just an amazing card just by itself right there. So it's, because it's only 2-mana drop, and then you can pay, say you have 6 mana, you can pay 4 more, so then they just find 4 land cards and have to discard everything, and it's just incredible. Alright, so I have a couple Tramatizes in here, and I've had them in here for a while, and as you can see, they are 10th edition cards, but they're 5-drop, and they actually, there you go, they actually brought them back in Magic 2014, the core expansion, so that was pretty exciting, but I didn't buy any new cards, so as you can see, they're both still 10th edition. So the target player puts the top half of his or her library rounded down into his or her graveyard. Now, this is going to be breaking the tradition of things, or not tradition, but the order of things. But I just want to show you these other cards that I have in here, because this is an amazing combo. So if you can pull out a Tramatize, put the top half, and then you can pull out one of the Keening Stones. Now they are a little bit expensive. They're a 6-drop, and then you got to pay 5 more and tap it to actually use the ability. But it puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, where X is the number of cards in that player's library. So if you already pulled out a Tramatize, that's their entire deck right there. So it's pretty decent combo, I think. It's a little hard to pull off, but that's okay. So, back to our sorceries, enchantments, and stuff. So we've got a Jace's Erasure here. I felt like I had more of these in here. Like, I had 2, but I guess not. Just 1. So it's a 2-drop for an enchantment on your opponent, again. And whenever you draw a card, you may have target player put the top card of his or her library into his or graveyard. So it's pretty decent. For, I don't know, just decent, because you can just whenever you draw a card. And that's another thing with that. If I can get more of those in here and then put a bunch of draw in, if I get one of those and I put a bunch of draw and I draw them and drawing a bunch of cards, then they'll be discarding a ton of cards. This is another pretty recent one from Gatecrash as well. It's got 5-drop for, it's Coerced Confession. I don't think I've been saying the name of the cards. It's probably should probably try to say the name of the cards, but anyway, it's for target player puts the top 4 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, and then you get to draw a card for each creature card put into the graveyard this way. So it's another one of those, trying to implement drawing cards into it, but I guess it's working out. Forgot to mention at the beginning of this video, you can look at the end of this video or the description of the video below to see a list of cards and the total number of cards in the deck. Alright, so next up I've got a Thought Scour. I should probably get a couple more of these as well, because it is another one of those draw cards I'm trying to get. It's a 1-drop for the top 2 cards of his or her library into the graveyard. And then, again, you get to draw a card. So maybe I should get a couple more of those, try to put those in there. But we'll see. Alright, so now I've got this nice foil Haunting Echoes. Kind of foil. You can't really see it on the video, but that's okay. It's 5-drop for exile all cards from target player's graveyard other than the basic land cards. And for each card exiled this way, search that player's library for all cards with the same name as that card and exile them. Then that player shuffle his or her library. Up there you can kind of see some foil. There you go. So I haven't really used it yet, so I don't know how effective it is. I mean, it sounds like it'd be pretty effective if they have multiple copies of a card in their deck. So it's like, I guess it could be decent. I'm not really sure yet, though. So the next card I have here is a Dream Twist, and I should probably get more of these too, because they are only a 1-drop for top 3 cards of his or library into his or graveyard, and then you do have a flashback for 2 mana. So if you use this and you don't draw anything that you can use the next turn, you can use it again right from the graveyard. So that's pretty good. Probably should get some more of those. And I've got a nice foil Psychic Strike here. There you can kind of see it. There it is. So it's a 3-mana drop for countering a target spell, and then its controller puts the top 2 cards, I don't know where 5 came from, of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So it's pretty decent. It's just a little bit of a counter. I only have 1 in here. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep it yet or not. I'll think about it, but it's just countering a card, and then they discard cards. So it's goes along with the theme of the deck, as well as being able to counter a little bit. So then we've got this Pilfered Plans, which is a 3-mana drop for target player putting the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, and then I get to draw 2 cards, so that's more of that draw that I'm trying to implement. We'll see how it goes. Alright, so last section we have here is our artifacts. I already showed you the 2 of them, so we have 5 artifacts total. First up, we've got these 2 Codex Shredders, and Codex Shredders are really nice because they're only a 1-mana drop, and then every turn you can go ahead and tap it for the top card of the opponent's library. You just gotta remember to tap it every turn. Or, if you really wanted to, you can pay 5 and tap it, and you can sacrifice it and return a target card from your graveyard to your hand. So if you had, say, one of your creatures died, or you used one of your sorceries or instants, and you had a bunch of extra mana, you can tap all that mana, tap this card, and get that back if it's a really good card. Like, for example, the Tramatize, if you want to do it again. I don't know. So then I got Dimir Cluestone because, it doesn't seem like it helped too much, but it's a 3-drop for, you can tap it and gets a little bit of extra mana for a while, and then if you're really not drawing anything you want and you got a couple extra mana, you can pay 2 mana to tap it and sacrifice it and then draw a card. So that's it for this deck. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you liked it. I encourage you to go ahead and let me know in the comments what you think about the deck. It does seem to work pretty well, although I'm trying to still implement that drawing card stuff, as well as trying to get the creatures on the battlefield, because I'm dying a lot just from not being able to block anything. So I guess that's it. Thank you very much for watching, and hope you come again next time.